So Planet Coaster 2 has just been announced, and a group of creators, including me, was kindly offered an exclusive digital look into the game, and we also got to look at some screenshots and the reveal trailer before it drops, so everyone's releasing videos about it right now. So I was also thinking, what can I really add to this conversation, which is gonna blow up right at this moment? Well, from my perspective, I'm just gonna throw my many years of experience as a theme park enthusiast into this, and looking at what we can expect based on what we've seen and what I remember from the exclusive digital look. So let's get into the very nerdy and nitty-gritty and do it pretty quickly. First of all, slides. This is the big new thing in Planet Coaster 2. Water parks and slides and all that good stuff. It's kind of like Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 soaked. So what can we expect? Well, one, I see body slides, the regular type, the 1200mm type if you will, and I think this accounts for some of the small kiddie slides we see as well. Second is trapdoor slides, which also implies the 900mm turbo slide size, but to be honest, it's not entirely clear to me looking at the video whether we have those different sizes of body slides. That would be a very realistic touch, but I'm gonna hold off my judgment here. 3, on a related note, looping flumes are confirmed in the tagline of the game, which could also be a combination with the trapdoor slides, which is very common in real life, but I'm gonna count it as a separate thing for now. 4, we have ball slides in the announcement trailer. A bit of a weird placement, but I'll take it. I'm also wondering if we'll get a variant that continues as a slide instead of dropping you in the water, which is actually kind of a rare sight nowadays in slide design. 5, we have sphere-shaped funnel slides, which were included in the exclusive first look, kind of like Rusty Splash in Qatar, with a large tube diameter, which looks around 1.5 to 2 meters maybe even, which also means that large tube slides, large inner tube slides, are probably on the menu with 4 to 8 people per tube. 6 are half-pipe slides of the Venus flytrap type, I don't have a better name for this, which were also included in the exclusive first look with a larger tube diameter. 7 are half-pipe slides with a small half-pipe variant, which were also included in the exclusive first look. And 8, multi-lane slides. They're on the key art, so I'm gonna assume they're in the game, which is also nice to have. And I think there's an honorable mention for the lazy rivers, which are technically not a slide, but I'll include it anyway, because they're in the screenshots and in the tagline. Now the good about slides in general, I think, are looking at the slide builder based on the layouts that we've seen, it'll be very flexible, just like the coaster builder. Small slides are possible, which is very nice for the kiddie areas, and the supports look very realistic. In fact, look at this small support on this slide here. It might seem like nothing, the supports so far though have always been vertical, so the fact that they've been figuring out how to connect supports in a smart way, horizontal or diagonally as well, and to terrain in this case, I think that's very exciting. Now I do have some gripes about the slides and the slide building. Overall criticism is that there are way too many ties. Ties are the places where different segments of fiberglass slide pieces are fastened together with bolts, and typically a 90-degree curve is made out of around 2 to 5 slide pieces. Depends on the size of the curve. Now this probably has something to do with the automatically generated supports needing many hookup points to work, but still, the final result looks kind of unrealistic to a slide nerd like me, and honestly, let me nitpick, because it might still impact development somehow, and these are some things that, at least from a realism perspective, looking at this kind of stick out to me. There are also some missing features, I think. Most of all, daylight elements. Daylight elements are rings and shapes that are translucent pieces of slide segments that will create different light effects when you're in the slide. Would be really cool if these made an appearance in-game, because they're very common nowadays. I'd also love to see stainless steel slide, but that's more of a nice to have than a must have. And I would like to note that we have yet to see small inner tube or mat slides, but we have seen guests in inner tubes and on mats in pools, so who knows what's gonna happen. And finally, we haven't seen any skim outs yet, which I think is interesting. Nowadays, many slides will end in a very shallow, small pool, specifically for that slide, which we call a skim out, whereas all of the slides that we've seen so far end inside a swimming pool. Now let's talk about paths next, which might usually not seem like the most interesting thing to talk about when it comes to a game, but it's been one of the biggest gripes for most people in Planet Coaster 1, and it looks like they fixed the path system. Looking at the screenshots, we can tell it's much more flexible. There are all kinds of plazas in shapes that we otherwise couldn't have done. But still, it's hard to see how it works exactly, so I'm gonna hold off some of my judgment on that as well. Also interesting to note is we've seen 3 path textures so far. Looking at these screenshots, we have beige tiles, a blue path, and sand from the looks of it. And also picnic areas are possible, which means chances for realistic restaurant buildings. There are also stair towers for waterslide queues, which look pretty realistic, although we don't know yet how they'll be built. And there are no regular paths and swimming pool paths separately, like in, for example, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. It's all just flush, it's the same path system, and you don't have to worry about going from one to the other, which is very nice and looks pretty clean. Speaking of which, let's talk about pools, because they look very good. I think they do look similar to Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, which is funny in terms of textures, the pool chairs, the lifeguards, etc. But altogether, I think they're pretty clean. We've seen changing rooms, like in this screenshot, where, by the way, we also see the old stall brands for food coming back, like Chief Beef. We've also seen very nice multiple types of pool edges, and this might just be scenery, but sometimes I see grey tiles and sometimes I see wood in some of these screenshots. And also there are pool edges without a path, which is something that I've always missed in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and this is going to make it much easier to blend your pools nicely into different types of scenery. Also, nice to mention, wave pools have been confirmed. Moving on, let's see what kind of coasters we'll have in this game, and I counted 6 in total. 1, the B&M Surf coaster, which looks like they're really making it the iconic coaster for this game, which I think is fitting. Also, fun fact that is not particularly useful, but interesting, is that they added something similar to Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 when they made the Wacky World expansion pack, and this is over 20 years ago, long before B&M built this coaster type in real life. So I don't know if they have future vision or what, but it's nice to see this in Planet Coaster 2. Second coaster is the B&M Dive Coaster, 2nd generation, which looks just like the one in Planet Coaster 1, down to the design and the paint scheme of the cars. The third coaster is the Intamin Mega coaster, at least it seems that way. The cars look like 1st generation Intamin Mega coasters, very low, very flat, with stadium style seating. That said, the box track does look a bit strange in some shots. I don't see any diagonal cross ties, for example, here, so I'm also going to hold off the rest of my judgment on that. 4 is the Wooden coaster, with, from the looks of it, traditional PTC style 6-person trains, not too special. Also kind of coming back from Planet Coaster 1. 5 is the Corkscrew coaster, also coming back from Planet Coaster 1. This looks like the classic Vekoma type. Not very easy to see in the screenshots, but I recognize this right away from the exclusive first look that we got. And 6 is a water coaster, which is mentioned in the tagline but not shown off anywhere, and we have yet to see what this means, but it could be something like the water coaster in Yas World in Abu Dhabi, or maybe just a mock water coaster with splashdowns. Now, talking about coasters in general, the good things that I've seen so far are that we have seen some quick shots of a coaster POV in the exclusive first look video, and from that very short shot, it seems to me at least that significant changes were made to the smoothing tool in the game. I'm not going to go deeper into this until we know more, but I do have a strong feeling that they're plotting something at Frontier. Also interesting to note, from the exclusive look I can tell that there will probably be a proper single rider and or fast pass line system that is better implemented than in the first game where it was kind of haphazardly added afterwards, so that's something to be on the lookout for as well. Then the flat rides, I counted 7 so far in total. First of all, we have the Hubless Ferris wheel making a return from Planet Coaster 1. This is based on the Ferris wheel in Tokyo Dome City. The second is the 360 Power, or at least that's how it's known in Planet Coaster 1. In real life it's often known as the Star Shape made by Zeder. Third is the Starflyer, which is also coming back from Planet Coaster 1. Fourth is the Teacups, which are remodeled from Planet Coaster 1 to be more generic, and you can now customize them of course. 5 is the Zamperla Gryphon. I don't know what it'll be called in Planet Coaster 2, but it is unmistakably based on the Zamperla version in real life, based on the elements that are jutting out from the arms, and keeping in mind that for Planet Coaster they will usually make most of the rides different enough from real life rides that they don't come into copyright issues, but, you know, come on, this is clearly what they're going for. 6 is something that looks like the Zamperla Rotoshake, but not quite. It's a bit smaller. I don't know what it's called. It probably exists in real life. I'm not entirely sure. And 7 is some type of booster. And now I want to talk about scenery, because this is the big thing, I think, and at least the thing that blew me away the most when I first saw all of this. And that is that we can choose the color of each individual piece, add and scale up or down objects and scenery, and also use these to theme rides and coasters, which is absolutely insane. We don't just have recolorability, but also scaling, and especially adding things to rides, which is something that I was secretly wishing for and I just never thought they'd add. But this is going to add so much creativity, and there are a couple of things that I can already think this is going to be very useful for. One of those is custom lights on roller coasters and flat rides, and I'm very serious. I think this could very well be a game changer. In the exclusive first look, we've seen Frontier put lights on roller coaster cars, and anyone who's seen Helix in Liseberg in real life or been at a German fairground at night probably knows why this makes me so hyped. There's a lot of creativity that goes into this, and this is going to be life-changing, I think, for night shots and lighting. As for flat rides, I am holding my breath as to where we can stick scenery. The middle of a teacup ride is pretty obviously something, we've seen that. But I don't know if we can stick things to the arms of a swinging ride too, for example. So I'm gonna also wait to see what actually happens with that. Then I also hope that the additions will count for blueprints as well, so that you can't just put blueprints on rides, which is something that we know we can do, but also that the stuff that we add to rides will be added to the blueprint when we make a blueprint out of it as well. And finally, and I think this is also a big thing, the animatronics and sequencer are coming back, and there's also a new event sequencer tool, whatever that means, according to the game's tagline. And hopefully we can use this to make the scenery that we put onto rides and coasters sync with music and program this as well, which I think would be a fairground dream come true, because this means you can really make some really cool shows with this. Then we have the fact that we can rescale scenery pieces, and I've heard from Rudy Renkamel, who spoke with Frontier about this, that this also goes for scenery pieces outside of the coaster and flat ride editing. So this is going to be huge for scenery detailers. That said, I don't think this is going to apply to all scenery pieces. Probably grid pieces won't be rescalable, but it's going to be applicable to many situations. And finally, recolorability I think is really great, and the more recolorability that we have, the better. We already know that the rocks that we see in some of these shots can be recolored because we've seen purple and black ones. I do hope and know that some pieces aren't going to be recolorable, because there is a downside to recolorable objects. They're often less realistic because you can't account for the natural color variations within a certain texture very well. But we have seen the standard and mossy rockwork from Planet Coaster 1 make a comeback, and they don't seem recolorable and they look pretty realistic. And of course foliage and things like this aren't going to be recolorable either, probably, so I think this will be fine. Now, speaking of scenery, there are 5 themes according to the tagline. One is the original Planet Coaster theme, which is definitely in the video and screenshots. The hotel buildings and such is all very recognizable. All the basic modern items that you'd expect and that are probably just coming back from Planet Coaster 1. The second theme is the Mythology Theme, which I think we haven't seen that yet. Sounds pretty mysterious, could be anything. Perhaps something classical and Greek or Roman inspired. Maybe with some fantasy elements, we'll have to see about that. The third is the Sunny Resort theme, which is probably in the video and the screenshots. I think the thatch roofs are probably from this. Probably also the wooden logs and the rope pieces that we see, including many loose ropes, which are very nice. And I think these ropes and wooden pieces are going to be useful for many themes that you can come up with as a player. Fourth is the vibrant aquatic theme, which is something that definitely features in the video, the pipes and stuff like that, but possibly also the corrugated rusty metal roofs that we can see, one of which looks recolorable by the way, and one of which less so, which looks more realistic. And speaking of which, I think it would be great if, just like with the rocks, they do this kind of thing where you have a recolorable version of some object, but also a standard, more realistic looking one. Just for variety's sake. And I think this aquatic theme could also very well work for steampunk and sci-fi themes, because we know we can recolor the pieces based on these screenshots. And the fifth theme is the Viking theme, which also seems like it's unseen, and I think is probably going to be somewhat similar to the Arctic pack in Planet Zoo. Then finally, listing off some other things. Foliage looks better than Planet Coaster 1, though not quite as good as Planet Zoo, I think. We have some tall palm trees, some of which look straight from Planco 1. Thick palm trees, which look nice. Small ferns and palms, also bushes, poplar-like trees and large generic trees. Lots of ground shrubbery and cattail reeds, which are nice, I missed those in the first game. And a lot of shrubbery, wall vines and flowers are seemingly making a comeback from Planet Coaster 1, if the start of the trailer is to be believed. I also saw a vehicle here on the hotel, which is nice. For all you parking lot realism nerds, you know who you are. And we've also seen custom signs. Also, there are many types of lights. The hanging lights are especially nice, I think. And final random thing worth pointing out is that King Coaster has been joined by some sort of queen and a new shark entertainer, which looks pretty cool. I dig the Hawaiian. Now let's talk about gameplay. There seems to be a weather button. There's a separate button with a sun and a cloud, aside from the standard day/night button that we could see in the exclusive look. So both of these things can be confirmed. And as for management, I find it hard to talk about this and tell you right now how good I think it'll be. I do think the simulation and management of Planet Coaster 1 has a lot of breadth, but not a lot of depth. You can tinker with many management options, but none of them feel truly consequential. And the game doesn't really guide you into certain challenges either. And I hope that with Planet Coaster 2 there can be franchise parks with specific challenges where every step the player makes feels like it makes a difference and slowly develops into a beautiful, complex mess of a park. At least that's how I personally like to see games like this, and what I think make the scenarios in Roller Coaster Tycoon so good to this day, and was really much of the philosophy in my creation of Parkitect scenarios as well. But we'll see about that. So far, kind of unfortunately, it seems like they're only adding more management options like power, water management and sunscreen. But I hope this will eventually add depth to the gameplay as well. I do have some hope for the newly announced heat map tool. That seems pretty nice, and I think it'd be interesting to see how this is combined with, for instance, the need of guests to have shade as well, and also think of sunscreen. Finally, multiplayer, I think is worth pointing out. Unfortunately, there is no simultaneous multiplayer, but it does look like it'll be easier to share parks. So to close off this video, overall, I am cautiously optimistic. I'll admit, Frontier is delivering on many things that people were requesting or missing in Planet Coaster 1, including myself, but that's also kind of my issue. It feels like they're addressing issues and expanding things from the first game in a way that it almost feels like an expansion. Aside from the slides, that is, because honestly I've been waiting my whole life for a good water park game. I played a lot of Wild Rides, Water Park Factory in my younger years, a shout out to anyone who remembers that game. Lots of Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, which up until now I think was one of the best slide and water park games. And I've closely followed the development of Operation Water Park by the Codemaster, shout out to the Codemaster. But I think every video game in this genre in the last few years hasn't even come close to the realism that Planet Coaster brought to roller coasters, or it just straight up wasn't finished. So mostly for that reason, I am very hyped. The game does look very promising. But I do hope that Frontier is able to still fine-tune based on community feedback, because so far I think it looks good, but there's potential for greatness. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video and at least learned something new from it, and I'll see you sometime down the line. And let's enjoy the fact that Planet Coaster 2 is really a thing and all this speculation was not for naught, because that's pretty amazing. Bye bye!